respect in the marketplace, and people will remember how we behaved during this time. The good news is we will get through it, but it's a mistake to not start planning now for reentry. You don't want to be digging yourself out of a hole and trying to catch up. So just think about it this way. If you're at work in 3 to 4 weeks, what would be the first thing you'd start to do to drive revenue? Also keeping in mind that for now, maybe retention is the new growth. And now is also the time to communicate with your customers and deepen relationships.
So we're going to talk a little bit about foundational crisis communications best practices, but I just wanted to make sure that everybody can see the PowerPoint presentation. I just got a note from a colleague at Communica saying that she couldn't see. So Jeff, can you just confirm that everybody can see the presentation okay?
Yeah, if you can see it, there's a reaction down at the bottom right-hand corner that you can raise your hand that says that you see it. If you could let me know, or if you don't, unmute yourself and let us know.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Thanks. So again, sort of talking about foundational best practices for public relations and communicating. Deb, you can flip to the next. So the role of, when you think of public relations, the role is really to build that long-term trust and confidence between a brand and its audiences, right? So this role is more critical during a crisis, and we've never experienced a crisis quite like the one we're having now. So one thing I sort of wanted to talk about, if you could go back for a second, is that when people think of public relations, they sort of historically think of media relations, right? So working with journalists and other influencers to get positive media coverage on behalf of your company or your brand. Well, that has really evolved in our digital world, where information is coming fast from every channel possible and through every source possible, right? So we really think of public relations as being the voice of your brand through all of these channels. So whether it be social media, whether it be a blog that you're developing or another piece of content, or whether it be an article that results from a conversation with a journalist. So if you think about it that way, how do you prepare? And we've really been working with our clients and as a company ourselves to go back to the basics. So the first thing we think about is audience first. So really thinking through who are all of your key stakeholders, and that starts internally. So your employees are your most important asset, but they're also your primary brand ambassadors for your company. So thinking through, has your communication with them been transparent? Do they know the status of the business? What are the possibilities of what it might look like in the coming weeks or months? Can you weather this crisis? And then really thinking through all of your external stakeholders, so your partners, your vendors, your customers, and the community. One thing that we really want to reiterate is that, research shows now is not the time to stop communicating. I think in a lot of instances it's kind of maybe your instinct to go into a hole, but now is not the time. And that's because research shows that those companies that continue to communicate through a downturn really have more success on the other end. So again, now that we've sort of identified our audiences, going back to those basics and really thought through who are all of the stakeholders who we should be thinking about communicating with, now developing that communication strategy and messaging. So just points to keep in mind. Again, transparency and honesty, hold truth to the facts and the data points if you have them. Share what you know, but you don't have to have all the answers, and it's okay to say that you don't. And to be consistent with your messaging across audiences. And you're going to hear this again and again and again if you haven't already, but be human. Considering the severity of what's happening in the world, acknowledge it and be empathetic. Now is not really a time to be pushing product unless it's absolutely something that's pertinent to what's happening right now. So we pulled this from one of the sources we reference a lot. Consumers are holding brands highly accountable, with 71% in agreement that businesses perceived as putting profit over people will lose that trust that's so important permanently. We also look to this trust parameter that came out recently from Edelman. And from those of you who aren't familiar, Edelman is the largest global public relations firm in the world by revenue. And they put out this special report on brand trust, specifically around the coronavirus pandemic. And 57% of respondents reported really wanting brands to rethink their tone and their messaging and to stop all humorous or lighthearted marketing and advertising right now. It's just not appropriate. 90% of respondents want brands to put their best efforts into focusing on their employees. So again, sort of going back to that, the health and financial security of their employees and suppliers during this pandemic. 84% of consumers want brands to give tips on coping with the pandemic. So they're looking for any sort of coping tips and really to focus on it. So there's, you know, as I think we've probably all seen, there's been an uptick in promotions around free apps on health and wellness, meditation, stress relief. And nearly 90% of respondents would also appreciate brands who offer free or lower price products to our frontline workers, so our healthcare workers and high-risk individuals. So in developing that strategy and messaging that we're talking about and sort of keeping these high-level thoughts in mind, other things you want to be thinking about is practicing active listening. So through social media, certainly get engaged, but also be sure you're monitoring your own channels and those of your trusted industry sources and even your competitors. You know, this could really be an opportune time to be looking at how they're handling messaging. If they're handling messaging, are they addressing it at all? It could be an opportunity for you. And other means of listening to your customers in the marketplace, you know, really paying attention to your analytics and other data sources, looking to your trusted trade publications, blogs, and organizations, and even consider, you know, some customer surveys. Something we've been talking about internally is really getting a pulse. Again, this is so unprecedented, a pulse on how they're feeling about things, getting a handle on their changed behavior and motivation, and what they're expecting from their partners and the brands that they trust. And then lastly, be responsive. So, you know, consumers expect brands to be responsive to queries and comments. And something else to keep in mind is that social media really is customer service. So you want to make sure that you're monitoring your social channels and that you are being responsive. One thing we talk about a lot with crisis communications is that if there is, you know, any negativity and it seems like it's out of line, it's absolutely okay to hide those comments. A lot of times your other brand fans will actually take care of some of that negativity for you. But another sort of rule of thumb is that if something's sort of persisting, offer to take it offline. Offer to, you know, say, hey, would love to talk with you about this. Give me a call, give them a number, give them an email, or offer to set up a Zoom. So those are sort of foundational baseline recommendations that apply really to all foundational crisis communications, but certainly apply here as well.
Great, thank you. So now we're going to talk about how to build and retain trust in your brand. Credibility is the foundation upon which we build trust, and trust is vital when building your brand. And especially at this time, you have to be credible. Does your company do what they say they'll do, and do they do it consistently? Are you reliable? According to Gartner Daily Insights, they noted that 83% of consumers refuse to do business with brands that they do not trust. To build brand trust, brands must focus on exhibiting transparency, warmth, honesty, and reliability. And this is true more than ever before. So at this point in time, we need to talk about setting the right tone with your brand. You must show empathy. It's okay to be human. I think that we've really had a reality check on our humanity here. I mean, how many times are you sitting around with your clients or your customers and you're literally now talking around their kitchen table? If you're a brand that demonstrates genuine concern for a situation that we're in and you offer support to your community, you're also strengthening your brand at this time. And people will remember that. They will remember that after we get through this, and they will note that your brand really behaved well during this time. It's all about tapping into that collective spirit of helping each other. You must be authentic. If you have something to share during this time, speak up. But when you're doing it, focus on informing, not promoting. Again, people remember that brands that were engaged with in community oriented during this time. You will do damage to your brand by coming across as too tone deaf or too optimistic or opportunistic rather during this time. You also must be authentic. Focus instead on how you can authentically leverage your expertise and manpower to give back to your community. And we've got a couple of examples here. I'm sure most of you are familiar with what Jute Mode is doing for the Here to Good program. And they've selected 188 small companies or individuals, and they're offering to create t-shirts to support these companies with their logo on them. But in the meantime, seeing this, they're not at work, they are taking the money for the t-shirts, giving back a portion of that money to those individuals and those companies. And then once when we get back from this stay-at-home order, they will produce the t-shirts, but they're giving money from the proceeds to those individuals. And there's another program that Dietz has got, Grubs for Scrubs, where they're developing 3 different t-shirts for in honor of healthcare workers, and a portion of that money is going back to feed those frontline workers. Now, on a grander scale, we've got Unilever, who's pledged more than $100 million in cleaning products for charities and almost $550 million in cash flow relief for their suppliers. So, you know, it runs the gamut. Just consider what your company might be able to do from a community effort in order to really build your brand in the marketplace.
So at Communica, we've really been evaluating and looking at a lot of the messaging and campaigns and advertising that's been coming out. And I've really kind of seen a formula for what's really working, what's resonating, in sort of an approach to that. So first and foremost, they acknowledge the situation, right? So we're in this unprecedented situation. Let's make sure to acknowledge it. To do anything else, again, comes off as feeling kind of tone deaf. Really talking about how they're keeping their employees safe, employees and partners and vendors, and then talk about what they're doing for their customers. That also extends to their community. And then even start to pave the way for future interest in their products and services. So a couple examples of that are the payment protection program from the auto workers. So, you know, sort of what they're doing and how they're trying to address. Uber is telling consumers, I don't know how many of you have seen this, and we were going to link it in, but we want to make sure we leave plenty of time for Q&A today. But Uber is telling consumers not to Uber. And I think it's been an interesting journey for Uber because they were getting some backlash around the perceived idea that they were putting their drivers at risk by continuing to have them on the streets. So now they've kind of shifted that messaging. So stay home for everyone who can't. Thank you for not riding. But all of that being said, there's still, they still have their drivers out there delivering critical medical supplies and other supplies to people who actually can't get out. So really interesting there and how they've shifted and been so agile and really listened to what's happening and adjusted accordingly. Fiat Chrysler has a social campaign right now. So I don't know how many of you saw the Bill Murray Super Bowl commercial that was out there. But they've kind of adjusted that Groundhog Day piece. And they're saying, you know, stay home, stay healthy. But then with the Jeep message is, when this is over, the trails will be waiting. So they're kind of, again, paving that way for future interest in their products and services. Another one that we've seen is wall side windows. And we thought this was a really interesting way to change and sort of shift your messaging, where windows have taken on a completely new function, right? So people are connecting through windows. When you can't, you have to maintain distance from each other, but grandparents are going over to see grandchildren through windows and things like, so they're really talking about their product in a completely new way that's very relevant and applicable. And they're also offering for people to schedule virtual, if you're ready now to talk about windows, schedule a virtual appointment, or we'll be here when you are ready. So again, it's about that tone and that message. So now that you've thought through your audiences, we've thought about developing messaging and sort of a framework for that, and thought through tone, now you really want to take a look at all of your communication channels and start to think through what's appropriate for each one of those channels. So for internal communications, you know, it's engaging your workers remotely. We've seen a lot of encouragement around daily touch points. So it engages your employees and it provides a bit of structure and normalcy. At Communica, we do a weekly huddle with the entire team. And then we do daily huddles with sort of our smaller groups, where we really are touching base daily. We're seeing each other. In some cases, some of our remote offices are saying they're feeling even more in touch than they did when we were all in the office every day. So, you know, leveraging different methods that I think we're all becoming very familiar with, like Zoom that we're on, and Google Meet. Social media, engaging your employees to take an active role in your social media channels, and creating and sharing content. Again, going back to that humanness and what's really appropriate right now to be out there with different kinds of content. And then internal email and newsletters, just to keep everybody up to speed on what the company is doing. And again, going back to that transparency and consistency. And then from an external standpoint, we really think it's very important that you're evaluating each touch point and paying special attention to any pre-scheduled messaging that you may have had. You might not even realize that you have some pre-scheduled posts or different things going out. You want to make sure that you're really looking at those to ensure that every touch point that you have is appropriate, and you are evaluating for tone. And again, be agile. So make sure you're looking at those regularly. Your website is more important than ever. Again, take a look at it for tone and for functionality. You know, everything is moving even more into a digital landscape. So, and that shift to e-commerce purchasing is changing the way people shop. People who had never even thought about, you know, shopping online are doing so now through all different kind of channels. And this can really also include, I know one of the questions that we got prior to today was, this can include messaging about how your company is trying to make shopping safer and more convenient. So for those who are still open, really getting messaging out there about what you're doing to make that shopping experience as safe as possible. So certainly in-store what you're doing, but also, you know, things like curbside pickup and all of those kind of things. Really important to be communicating that right now consistently across all of your communication channels. So in continuing to think about your different communication channels and that external communications, we wanted to talk a little bit about content. So all different kinds of content. So from blogs to newsletters to your social media posts, maybe email marketing. Really think about that content. And right now the focus and thematically through all of this, right, is about building connections and building trust. So being more focused on those connections, that transparency, that honesty, that empathy, than about selling product right now. So those mixes of content could be anything from, company news. So again, what you're doing as a company, what you're doing for your employees, potentially what you're doing in your community, but also, relevant good industry news that you're seeing that to share with your customers, but also with your partners, and then general news that you're seeing that's out there. I know at Communica, one thing we're trying to do is sort of collate what we think is the best research and information that's coming out weekly from a marketing and communication standpoint, and sharing that out. So again, just different communication types. So across newsletters and blogs, certainly email marketing and marketing automation now might be a great time to think about sort of your funnel management program. So what does that content look like that's raising awareness for your products or services and driving them all the way down to the sale? What are you, being cognizant of your tone? And then digital or offline advertising, taking a look at Google AdWords, really looking at that shift to digital right now. So something else definitely to think about and look at closely, we've touched on it, but here in a little bit more detail, are those social media channels. So engagement with everybody working from home and everybody really being dialed in a way that they just haven't been in the past, engagement is at an all-time high. So social media, both your organic posts and paid, is really a great way to stay present, especially on a budget right now, which we know everybody is really thinking about and concerned about. One thing about social media is that it really allows for very precise targeting with current interests matched with current behaviors and demographics. So because social media is live and because you can be so targeted, you can really target and really listen and change your messaging to almost be in real time to ensure that your tone and your message are resonating. Social media is really presenting that opportunity to kind of have a different kind of relationship with your customers and stakeholders right now. Again, it's okay to be human. It's really okay to meld that business acumen with that more, things in your personal life. We're all on meetings like this every day. Our kids are showing up behind us. Our dogs are barking. And it's okay to, for that kind of tone and messaging to come in. Again, it can give an inside look at your team and inside your business. Remember, again, now is the time for authenticity. So just showing a little bit of a different side of your business that maybe you don't really think about. And again, it allows for active listening. So by really paying attention to your social and listening, you're going to get better insights, and that's going to help you make better decisions for what's next in your communication strategy.
Okay, so we don't want to get too redundant here, and we're going to wrap this up quickly, but we just want to reiterate the trends that we're seeing now. Humanizing of business communications is huge, as we've talked about. Sitting around your kitchen table or talking to your customer from their living room is a totally different experience in this work from home culture. So the way we're communicating is totally different, and it really is dropping some of the gates from the way we treat each other as human beings. So business communication is softening and becoming more humanized. And again, focusing on the deepening of relationships. We care about our customers, we care about our employees, and how are we articulating that? Consider empathy first and how you might be able to make an impact on your community. And there's a lot more focus on keeping it local. In fact, we're seeing as an agency, a lot of the local news reporters reaching out to us going, hey, what news do you have? People are paying attention to their local news a lot more. And community information, because of your proximity to your community, is becoming more important. The shift to digital is huge and is becoming more and more so. Content is really king now. You've got to use your content, creating new content, repurposing past that you can push out again, and ensuring sharing important content. And this can be in the form of blogs, email marketing, whether it's a MailChimp campaign. Video is huge right now, and you should really be paying attention to your social media. are you strong enough in that area? Or as a business, have you just been saying, well, I really don't need to get involved in social? Well, you do, and the time is now because people are paying more and more attention to it. So what could reentry look like? I mean, we don't know, but I think there's some important things that we need to do. You need to research what's going on. You need to listen and plan. So what trusted resources are you listening to? You've got to pay attention to your industry news, general business and consumer insights, as well as local, state, and national global officials. What are they saying about the environment? When are we going to get back to work? What opportunities might be out there? And to do that, you've got to prepare. You've got to evaluate your internal tools, processes, and roles, and external engagement and deliverables. What tools do you need to update? What skill sets, if any, upon reentry? I mean, is your website in really good shape? Is your social media team strong? Are you developing the content that you need to talk to your customers? And then you need to develop a plan and implement that plan and carry it out. So I think if we circle back, the most important thing we'd like to leave you with is that you can't be quiet at this time. You've got to be able to plan and not be in a situation where you're going to dig yourself out of a hole in 3 or 4 weeks because you haven't been forward thinking and you haven't planned your communication strategy. So we're going to open it up for questions. Jeff?
Yes, give me 1 second here to unmute everyone.
Okay.
So everyone is unmuted on my side. If you've muted yourself and you have a question, you can go ahead and unmute and go ahead and fire away. Amy and Debbie are ready to answer your questions.
While we're waiting, I wanted to just make one more point that and Deb touched on it in that last, but that, we're really seeing very, very high engagement with video right now. Obviously, you can't be in the studio shooting video necessarily the way that we historically would have. But I also think with that, very much more casual video that you shoot on your iPhone or your phone in general, I think is absolutely acceptable and encouraged right now. And I do think it's bringing a different leveling of engagement than it was even prior to this. So I just wanted to put that out there. I think even just putting simple messages out there from your company on video can really be to your advantage.
Good point. Yep.
Glad you said that.
I have a comment on that. I see that Dee Keating is on the call. She's a realtor, and the other day I took a house tour that she did over video on Facebook because it was a new listing, and it was a fantastic tour, and it was raw and personal, and it like didn't go to a studio to be produced, but it was really well done.
Thank you.
That's great.
That's how we're doing business these days in real estate, trying to keep everybody safe. I mean, it's, we're no different than the big companies. Remax Preferred has done a really good job trying to get the word out there that we're still there, and we are still an essential employee because people are still, the estates. I mean, I've got a couple of estate listings that, is what's keeping me busy. Is my phone ringing off the hook? No, it's kind of getting scary, but we're doing what we can to keep our name out there because we are still vital. The title companies are still out there. They're still doing closings. The banks are still doing loans and getting us. It's a little bit difficult and a little bit timely than what it ever was, but we're still getting people to the closing table however we can.
Yeah. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have suggestions if someone has never blogged before? Do you have suggestions for how to start with that? If maybe their website isn't capable, or maybe their website just isn't up to the best standards, suggestions for how you might start on that?
Well, if the website isn't up to par, there are other ways to push content out. MailChimp is a great way to do that in an inexpensive way. So you can develop messaging and push it out to your key stakeholders through MailChimp. That's an inexpensive way to do it, and then integrate that campaign with what you're talking about on social media. So it's all about keeping all the platforms active, whether it be email marketing or social media, or, you know, if you have an opportunity to blog, it's very helpful.
Just asked for any suggestions if your website has a blog and it is not up to par.
I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Can you repeat that question, please? No. Okay.
Sabrina, was that you with a question?
No? Any other questions? Feel free to just fire away.
I heard that it was something related to a website. So we are working with our clients and even getting some new work around updating websites right now. And so I think there is kind of a proliferation of thinking right now of what can we be doing to get ready. So really taking a look at that website and saying, you know, what do I need to do to update it or get it ready for kind of reemergence. It's a great time to be thinking that way, even if it's just updated messaging.
And, you know, even paying attention to what's going on in your industry and pushing that information out to your clients. It doesn't have to be your own content. I mean, we're creating a digest of research that we're seeing daily and insights that we're seeing daily and pushing that out. So you can take content from another source, and just like the great Edelman content we had in our presentation, I mean, that's very informative. You don't have to depend on yourself for that. You can share it.
Right. And I think that mix of different kinds of content is really important. Like we talked about, some of it might be your own messaging, some of it might be reshared. Some of it could be just things that, you know, your employees are doing. I said at Communica, we've been really focusing on team, as I think everybody is, and certainly working together as a team to ensure that we are communicating fluidly with each other, but also doing some fun things to share that externally on our social channels.
If there are no other questions, although if you do get a question, you can always feel free to reach out to Debbie. You all have my email as well. If you want to email me a question, we can share that on. But Debbie and Amy, thank you so much for this wonderful and very, very valuable information. We certainly appreciate it. Again, we will share this presentation on the Chamber's website on our member resources page. Give us a little bit of time to get that all loaded up and on there. I know I'm going to go back and watch it again because there are so many times that I'm like, ooh, that's great information. I need to remember that. So thank you again. And everybody, just be well, be safe, and thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again for the opportunity.
Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.